here we're going to talk a little bit about the concepts of data visualization first. So when we say, the term data visualization, it's a kind of popular term these days. Instead of just saying charts or graphics, now we say data visualization. Now, visualization is such a long word. Sometimes people just call it viz. So sometimes you see the term data viz. It's kind of like cool thing to say, data viz. Instead of saying, see the figure here, you say, look at the viz. Look at the data viz over here. Okay. So it basically has to do with summaries, creating summaries and tables, and it's mostly referred to, we mostly refer to the charts, the pictures, the figures, when we talk about data visualization. So we discussed the pivot table so far to summarize our data. Now we're going to discuss the making graphs and charts for the data. So the nice thing about the charts, the picture, as we said before, picture is worth 1,000 words. And it lets you quickly understand what's going on. So if you give when you're doing a presentation to your boss and you give him a bunch of numbers, you give him like a screenshot of a spreadsheet. It's going to make them kind of tense. Right? So if you give a bunch of numbers, and then it's hard for them to immediately grasp what's going on. But if you turn these numbers into a picture, like a pie chart or column chart, bar chart, or scatter chart, it will be much easier for the audience or your boss to understand, and so you guys kind of see them relaxing, and so it's definitely a more friendly approach in presenting your findings, using pictures. And also, you could use pictures for yourself. So when you want to do some data analysis, one of the first things you want to do is draw a lot of pictures. So create charts from your data to understand what's going on. So you want to see if there are some kind of outliers. Are there points that are kind of unusual, far from the other points? So if you see some outlier, you might want to see, is this because of some kind of error, or is this a real thing, maybe something that you want to pay attention to. If you're, let's say, looking at your customer data, how much your customer has purchased for the last 6 months, and you see some customer that has purchased much higher quantity, than the others, then you might want to look at the customer and see, okay, what did we do right? So, what kind of customer is this? Let's try to attract more customers like this one. So detecting outliers is important. And then distributions, how spread out is your data? Is there a lot of variability? Is it skewed to the left, skewed to the right? That kind of thing. You also want to see on the errors in the data. You might be able to detect by just looking at the picture of the data to detect the unusual point. And the patterns, is there some kind of maybe seasonal pattern in your sales? Maybe the one quarter you have higher sales, and then another quarter you have the lower sales. So you want to detect some patterns, and also trends like are your sales growing, or is it decreasing? Or you can also compare different regions. Which region is doing better than other, and then you could quickly see that by charting, by making appropriate charts. So you want to create charts when you are first studying the data. You have your data, now you want to do some analysis. So one of the first things you want to do is make some charts with your data. In addition to building pivot tables and computing summaries like means and standard deviations and things like that. Okay, and also you want to create charts in order to present your results. So you did your analysis, you have some formulas, you have some equations, you have some numbers you want to present, but the more friendly approach would be to give them some pictures to get some idea, so that people could get some idea quickly of what's going on. And then maybe you could show some formulas and numbers if they want to see them. But you don't want to intimidate your audience by right off the bat showing lots of details. Okay, so you wanted to kind of get a picture, overall picture first. So again, pictures are important in 2 stages: when you explore the data, and also when you present the result after you do the analysis. Okay, and there is a Edward Tufte is a kind of one of the gurus, maybe the guru of the data visualization. He wrote an authoritative book on this, the visual display of quantitative information. So he gives a lot of tips and a lot of examples of good data visualization. One of the things that he really espouses is that the thing about the having only the essential stuff on your visualization. Only the important, essential things that give you information, and get rid of the other stuff. Get rid of the non-essential elements from your data visualization. So there is a little ratio he talks about, data ink ratio. So that's the ratio of the ink that is used for the data, the important stuff, as opposed to unimportant stuff. So let me kind of show an example of what we mean by that. Here we have we got a table here. We have a chart here. So these are examples of visualizations that have low data ink ratio. So there's a lot of ink wasted on non-essential elements in this visualization. Can you see why we think that there is some wasted ink, like say this one? Okay, well, here's a contrast. Okay, here's a hint. This is good. This is good, and that is bad. So what is bad about this?
There are lines. There are lines around it.
Yeah, there's like lines all over the place. So there's all these lines separating, each individual data point. You don't really need it. You don't need it. It's just cluttering up the space. So it's harder to see the actual data because it's so cluttered. And the same thing here, and there's all these grids here that maybe you don't need them. And what is this little thing here? It says sales. Like, why do we even need this? We know this is sales. It says here, sales, right here. So this is kind of just redundant information. You might want to use something like this if you had more than one data series. Maybe you have a sales, and then maybe you have some, costs or some other data series going around. Then you might want to have some kind of legend to indicate which is which. And so here also, what is now? This one does not have what is that thing you call? Axis what?
Axis labels.
Axis labels, right? So axis labels, axis titles, and so the same thing. So you don't know what these things are. Like, what is this? What is that? 150 what? 150 scarves? Or 150,000 scarves? Or is it like $150,000 of scarves, or what? And so you need to really label. Very important. Again, I keep saying over and over. Very important to label your title, your axis. And then of course over here too. Like, what is this? What do these numbers mean? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Is this like is this? I guess it's days because it's this day here. But like 1 month, the day of what? Is this like dates? Like October 1st, October 2nd? What are these things? And so again, important to label your axis. So the labels that you would put around the axis, the ink that you use for those will be considered data ink. So that's the important stuff. The ink is being used for the important things that give you the essential information. Now, ink that's used for these lines, okay, that's not that we will call it non-data ink. So ink that's being wasted on non-essential element. But you might say, well, wouldn't you want these grids? Like, this gives you some information, so I could see, the first one was about 150, second one was somewhere between 150 and 200, so maybe it's about 175. So the grids could be helpful, right? So if you want to know approximately where these numbers fall, but the common wisdom is that if you are making a chart, you're emphasizing the trend, the overall, how it's going up and down, not the actual precise numbers. If you want to give precise values, you should give a table, like this kind of table. Or maybe you could put some like little numbers over these things. It is kind of cluttery, but maybe if you don't have room for a table, you could give some numbers next to the individual points by using data labels. And so grids are kind of frowned upon by many people for the charts. I mean, I don't have strong feelings, but you should know. You should know that. Okay. And let's see. So here, okay, wow, what an improvement. So here you could see, oh, okay, no lines. I could see the numbers better. And here, no lines, it's more clear. Now I could see what these things are. We got the units, we got the day. Okay. So it's not that it doesn't have as much clutter, and most of the stuff that's on the chart are essential. Now this kind of line, yeah, it would be good to have some line. So it'd be good to have some horizontal line, maybe on the top and maybe on the bottom. That's fine, but maybe you don't want to give like lines for each line for each row. Okay, and let's see. So here, let me just kind of interpret for you what this what this means. So let's see. You got here. So this will be like. If you here's a data ink ratio. So this is the important stuff. Ink that's used for the ink used for conveying the essential data information, and non-data ink that serves no useful purpose. Okay, so if you say total ink means the the sum of the data ink and non-data ink. So okay, well, data ink plus the non-data ink. I mean, not that we're gonna like measure our ink. So it's not like I mean, this is not supposed to have some kind of numbers. We're not trying to really kind of give some numbers for these, but it's just a concept. So the concept is the idea of there is some kind of ratio, and you want to use most of your ink on the data, on the essential elements. And so you want this. So for instance, maybe if you say data ink ratio is let's say it's 80%. So that would mean, for instance, maybe like 80 units of ink or whatever you call it. So 80 units might be used for the data, and then maybe 20 units is used for non-data. So we'll say, okay, so that's 80%. Okay. But again, we're not trying to give some kind of precise numbers, but it's just the idea of the thing. So for instance, if I were to, so if you, let's say, increase, so how do you, let's see, whatever does it here, okay. So in order to increase the ratio, data ink ratio, there are two options. One is you could decrease what? You could decrease data ink or non-data ink. If you want to increase this ratio, okay, would you want to increase would you want to, well, okay, what would you want to do? Decrease what? The denominator, right, that's right. So increase that, so you want to decrease the denominator, because as you know, if the fraction, if you want the fraction to increase, then you could decrease the denominator. So that would be like if you were to reduce this. So if you were to reduce the non-data ink, right? So if you were to reduce the non-data ink, so for instance, maybe instead of 20 units here, maybe you make it 10 units. So then you're gonna have 80, and then 80 plus 10, so that's gonna be 8/9, or about 88.8% or something like that. So let's say about 89%. Now you have increased your data ink ratio. Okay. Now, or you could do it by increasing the other thing, right? Increasing the data ink. Or increase the data inc. So for instance, adding the labels that are that are important to understand the data. So if you increase the data inc, then what will happen is, for instance, let's say you had 80 and 80 plus 20. Now suppose I increase the data inc, like these parts, then I'm going to get maybe let's say make it 90, for instance. So 90 plus 20, and that's going to give you 90 over
110.
110. Okay, and that should
That's
increase.
equal like 89%.
Let's see. So yes, just try it like on your computer. 90 divided by 110, or 9 divided by 11.
Or 81%.
81%. Okay, a little bit higher than 80. Okay, so now it's 81%. So I have increased my data inc ratio. So increase the data inc or reduce the non-data inc. So, but usually you go with the reducing the non-data inc. Just getting rid of the clutter, helps to the data to stand out more. Okay, so that is what I was saying about data inc. And so tables versus charts. When should you use tables? When should you use charts? So here is a table, right? So here's a table with precise numbers, and here is a chart that shows you kind of like a trend of your data. And what is this? This is a costs and revenues by month for Gossamer Industries. So these are their 6 months here. We got the costs in dollars, revenues in dollars. And then here is a picture version of this, a chart version. You have month here, and here you have the revenues and costs in dollars. So here, maybe there should have been something here. So you could see here, let's see, the revenues are this dotted line here, and the costs are the solid line here. Okay. So now the table, with the table, I could look at from the table. I could see the precise values. So I could tell how much the cost, how much revenues for each month, and I could see that as far as the costs go, from January to February, I assume is the month 1 to month 2. It went up pretty significantly, but the revenues went up just a little bit here, and so forth. Now here I could see the kind of the trend. The cost was down here. The cost was down here, so the cost was significantly lower than the revenue in month 1, but the cost now went up as the revenues kind of stayed flat. So the cost went up, and now they were pretty similar to each other. And at one point, the cost was actually higher than the revenue. And then near the end, the costs are now a little bit lower than the revenue, so things are starting to look better. And so you could see that kind of trend and the relative, the comparison, just by looking at this chart. But if you want to know the precise values, you have to look at a table. Okay, so here are the differences. If you want the specific values, you want to make precise comparisons, then you should use a table. Now, if you want to just look at the pattern, and if you want to get the idea pretty quickly, when you look at the visualization, you should use charts. And you would just want some relative comparisons. You don't have to know the precise comparisons. How much the cost outweighed and exceeded the revenue 1 month, exactly how much. You don't have to know that. Then you could just look at the chart. And the shapes and trends, patterns and relationships, those are easy to see by looking at a chart. Okay, at this point here, the display the values with different units or very different magnitudes. And so by this, what I mean is it's kind of hard to display several data series with different orders of magnitudes on a chart. So in that case, a table would be a better format. So here is what I mean here. Right, so here you got besides the cost and the revenues, we also have the head count of the employees. Now, if I try to put all these on one chart, it'll be a little bit confusing. So if I were to use the same axis, same y-axis, the head count will be way down, way close to the horizontal axis, and the other values will be much higher. so you couldn't tell what's going on. Or you could do, you could actually do a secondary axis, and let's see. So you could do something like this. Okay, so like this might be $1, and this one might be the number of people. Okay, so head count here. So here you could do, let's say here's a 10. Oops, that's pretty here. 10, 5, and so forth. So I could kind of put things 8, 9, 10, 9, and so forth. And then here you have $1, and you have different numbers here, like the dollar amounts, like 40. What's the like we saw before, like 60,000, 50,000, and so forth, like that. But it does get. If you have to, you can maybe you could, but it gets a little confusing, and it does add to the clutter. Okay, but there is a pretty easy way to do it. So the recommended thing is that to show a table. Kind of more like this, rather than trying to fit all these different kinds of data on one chart, or you could maybe, or maybe you could use like two different charts. Maybe cost and revenues on one chart, and then the head count on another chart. Okay, and let's see. So about table design. So here for the table design, just avoid using too many lines. Basically, that's the lesson for table design, to avoid a lot of non-data ink. So avoid using vertical lines unless they are really necessary, and horizontal lines don't. Again, maybe somewhere near the top and somewhere near the bottom. And so, for instance, take a look at these 4 examples. So the first one you could see is it good or bad? Nope, bad. Right. So this is bad. There's a lot of ink being used on these lines, like all these thick lines.
The fourth one is good.
Yeah, right. So the fourth one, not so many lines, and so we'll say, oh yeah, that one, I like that one, and I could still tell, which number belongs to where, for each one, I know which month and whether it's a cost or revenue. So I don't really need, more lines. But it would be good to put a line here to separate the data from the calculation. And so to get the profit, you gotta go take the difference, right? Revenue minus the cost. So that's some kind of result of some calculation. So it would be a good idea to put some kind of line separating the data and the result here. And it might be a good idea to put a line here, after below the heading, below the column headings. So that's okay. And a similar thing here. Here you have the totals, so it might be a good idea to put a line separating the total and the individual month, the figures for the individual month. Okay. So this kind of thing is overkill. You don't really need all these lines. This is better. But I would prefer this, since you don't really need those vertical lines to see which month you're at. Okay, so now unless you have a really large data, sometimes you do need to separate, to make it more clear. So for instance, something like this, if you have a bunch of numbers here, and maybe instead of using lines, maybe you might use some kind of different shading. To make it more subtle, right? Than having all these, so many lines going up and down. And so different shading might be a good idea if you do need to distinguish different columns.